to Ghana, to Jamaica, and then we look at things like this woman named Mama Nanny, who was she's on the $500 bill in Jamaica. She leads the revolt of Maroons in 1783, and she has her independence, and the independence these people call the Black Maroons, for the entire time in Jamaica. They will then lead to Marcus Garvey, who was one of those people, right? But in every one of these places, you can see how culture either changes, stays the same, goes away. Do Europeans adopt it and it becomes part of their culture? Things of that nature. So for people like me, it's very big in terms of this time period of the trade. We're very much about like where these people go from here to here, and then very much about, like I say, a lot about culture, a lot about religion, a lot about aesthetics. You know what I mean? Because sometimes culture stays in a way that you don't think it does. Like you say, well, that's different now. They don't have this anymore. But the aesthetic was, let's say, that they like hot food. So you may say they don't have the same pepper that they used to have before, but they still love hot food. So they now do really hot food, but with these different things that they found in this world. But the aesthetic, I want something hot, doesn't change. Okay? It looks like it changed because they use some other outward expression of it, but the value is the same, right? Same like religion. If you believe that God is here on behalf of the oppressed, then, you might be Catholic, you might be, any kind of Protestant religion, but at the core level, if you believe that's where God is, then that's your aesthetic about God. So we try to be able to find ways to look at these connections. So one of the most important scholars for us, this guy's name is Robert Ferris Thompson, and he is like, yes, please, can you do that?
Yes.
So Robert Ferris Thompson.
Yes.
Robert Ferris
You better
Thompson.
be on your game.
Yeah, see, let's just know what's going on. But Robert Ferris Thompson. Okay? Ferris Thompson. I think you got it. I got you. Here you go. That's him. All right. Yeah, that's him. Go on. That's him. So this is Robert Ferris Thompson. So, and this goes back to what I'm telling you guys, is a discipline. A discipline means that anybody can learn it because it's about learning the steps and learning the epistemology and learning stuff. Robert Ferris Thompson happens to be white. Okay? He's an art critic or art historian primarily at Yale, and then he's retired. This dude wrote this amazing, this is my book. Oh my God. Flash of the Spirit. Ooh! It's like it's the Bible for us who do African diaspora work. He takes four major cultures: Yoruba, Akan, Bakongo, and Ashanti. Well, Yoruba, Akan, and Ashanti are the same. Yoruba and Igbo, and it gives you a real strong emphasis of what they are, what that looks like, and then says who are these people in, like Igbo culture is big in Virginia, and so it's like he shows you all the different steps for Virginia, and then he goes here all the steps to this, awesome, but great kind of guy. Next person, pull up Sterling Stuckey. This guy named Sterling Stuckey. So Sterling Stuckey used to be a professor at UC Riverside. He used to be at the University of Chicago, and he was one of the big people that when UCR was really trying to say, okay, we want people to respect us, they went out and paid like crazy money to get this dude. He died about 4 years ago. If you were in Riverside, downtown Riverside, he used to always be sitting at, what's the little, down there across from the Mission Inn, the little bakery? Simple Simons. He'd be sitting there in a little cubicle, he's like a true scholar. Like, he could care less about all the rest of his stuff. He's like, I'm in there doing my thing. This dude, he writes this book, Slave Culture. Can you bring up Slave Culture? Yeah, because that's the home. So Slave Culture. But it's Sterling Stuckey, Slave Culture. Yeah, it's this book called Slave Culture. And I tell people this, if you try to read that book, you can't read it as a linear book because it's not linear. It's like a jazz riff. I'm serious. He takes like a story from Herman Melville and he'll deconstruct it. And after you've read it, you thought I knew Moby Dick. No, you find out that Moby Dick is all about this African stuff that you didn't even know about. You know what I mean? He's also a jazz guy. Like at UCR, he used to host the jazz show at night. He had all these LPs and stuff like that. But like you start with the chapter and then it starts going like this, and then it goes to poetry, and then it goes over here to literature, and then it goes over here to archaeology, and it goes over here to this. I mean, it's really, as African diaspora scholars, we try to draw, and he did it. And it's an amazing book. And he championed this notion that he called the ring shout. The ring shout is just this little bitty dance. It's just two-step. But when you do it in a circle and you have it activated with something like a drum or spiritual stuff, it becomes a place where all kinds of crazy cultural stuff can happen. And he talks about how that's brought from Africa to the Americas, and how that even becomes the means by which people get to Christianity. That at a certain point, they want to be a Christian person, but they can't get it the European way. They got to get it in the circle, in the African way. Even it's going towards Christ and everything else, but they got to get it in that way. I got to feel it. Because the European came and said, you can think about religion, contemplate it, and, surmise and think about it all day. And the African said, I feel my religion in my bones. I feel it in here. And if I don't feel it in here, it's not really real. So, no, just that's cool. Because you can't. But so that's Sterling Stuckey right there. And the book is amazing. So Paulette and I had him as, a lot of these people are West Coast. Paulette and I had him as an instructor on this class called Slave Culture. And he was he looked a lot like that guy. In class, he looked like Carl Westmoreland. They actually know each other. The dude who was at the Freedom Center with the freckles, they're good friends. But this dude, it's not that he was this kind of lecturer that you're like, oh, it's so dynamic or anything like that. It's the depths in which he would take your brain to think about something. Like, he'd give you a piece in his literature, and you're like, this is supposed to be a history class. And he'd say, what's going on there? You'd have a whole week, and you'd come in for the first hour and a half of seminar, and you'd be blah, 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 talking about all this stuff. He'd be like, almost like, come on. And then all of a sudden, this dude who always walked around like he's all old and stuff like this would just come alive. And then he'd be like, I remember when the brothers used to walk on the avenue. And he would start, you know what I mean? And he'd be like, and you had to be sharp, my brother. And then he would talk, and he said there was a way in which some songs would do this thing, And then he would just start going. He said, and we would get to moving. And he said, I remember reading about this account of this guy Henry Dana, who Dana Point is named after. Henry Richard Dana was a guy who traveled all around. He did all these travel accounts, and he has all these ones about New Orleans and Cuba about black churches. And Stuckey will talk about him showing he called it religious exercise, the stuff that goes on, spiritual exercise that goes on in black churches when we get happy. Y'all get where I'm going? Get happy, get to that motion, get to that place. What Thelonious Monk called the blue note, that part that you can't touch. That's what Sterling Stuckey's into. And he could find a way to get that to you and just, he is an amazing person. And like I say, don't have two words to say outside of class or anything like that. And most of the time we just sit there, and his notion is, no, because I'm working on this book. His last book he was working on was about Frederick Douglass, and he'd been working on it for 20-something years. He used to always say, Daniel, it's not about you having a whole bunch of books, it's about do people still read your book 10 years later. So Sterling Stuckey. Next person up, his name is Paul Gilroy, and the book is called The Black Atlantic. So this guy, he says a lot of books because it's a discipline. You guys get where I'm coming from? This is why, I'm sorry, but it'll piss me off when I'm like, people aren't doing their homework. People don't do their work. People want to come in, it's like, you haven't done nothing. If it's psychology, you would know Sigmund Freud. You know what I mean? If it's sociology, you know Max Weber. You know what I mean? It's mathematics, you know Einstein, the theory of relativity and everything else. But people get into don't nobody know nothing. They just be like, because you black. You know what I mean? And it's not a feeling, it's a discipline. So, Paul Gilroy writes this book called Black Atlantic, where he really captures this notion of Europe, Africa, the Americas, and the notion that it's all one system, he's saying. Culturally, economically, and all this stuff. Now, Paul Gilroy is part of the Windward generation. Do you guys know what that is? They're the people who leave Jamaica and the British West Indies to come to work in England in the period of World War II up until the mid-1960s. So if you ever go to England, there's a section called Brixton, and Brixton is basically Kingston, Jamaica. Okay, that's what it is. I mean, it's that. But he's one of those people. So he's looking at it as Africans to the Caribbean, Caribbean to Europe, and then connecting all the dots. He's a theoretician about it, meaning he's going to open up the framework for us to understand it. Now, African diaspora approach is much newer than the other ones. We're really big, I'd say, 90s until now. It's really the wave kind of. But Black Atlantic, and then pull up my book. No more. And then the other scholar, who's very important about this, and somebody said he might be halfway decent looking, is this guy. And just go ahead and push that. And this is a guy named Daniel Walker. He writes this book called No More, No More. I'm going to take it as a scholar. if you Google my name, I don't play in this stuff, all right? I'm real in this game. I don't play, all right? Read the reviews of my book in the American Historical Review. I talk about the most important book that's been written on the subject since okay? Don't play with me, all right? And Stuckey is the type of person, he told me, it's not about all of this, it's about people still reading your book. They're still quoting me. I get called to conferences years later and stuff. People, hey, our whole class is centered around your book. My book is, I was taking all that I had got. I've been in Karinga's class, you guys get me? I've been in Malefi Asante's class. I've been in Sterling Stuckey's class. I've been in all this stuff. I was blessed to have the mentors and everything else. So now the question is, what you gonna do with it, bro? You know? What is that?
Can you go back to the book, sweetie? I was trying to get a picture.
Which one? Which one?
Just one shot back.
Which book?
The book.
Your book. Your book.
Oh yeah. No more. That's my book right
Yeah,
there.
that one right there.
Yeah.
Your book.
So in that book, what I'm doing is I was trying to figure out how can we establish the discipline. Once again, I've understood that there's a guy named Carter G. Woodson who said you got to have a journal, right? A discipline, some books, some other things. I grew up through Malefi Asante and Karinga. You establish the discipline, you create a journal. Their journal is called Journal of Black Studies, So I created the PhD program at Indiana University in the history of the African diaspora. That's me. So and it's crazy now because of some things that are going now in the White House. Indiana University is closing certain programs and consolidating others, and one of them is the PhD program that I created. We don't know what it's going to end up looking like. It may turn into something else because there's also another program that may mesh it. But my notion was you create the discipline. So I was blessed when I first became a scholar. I worked at Indiana University. They were open to what I was doing. Because I look at music and dance and history and archaeology and all this stuff, they didn't have silos and they allowed me to be where I need to be. I could go over to the music department and hang out. I could go over here and do my thing. And this book, I was just trying to take the book, in my early career was trying to take what I had learned. If it's African diaspora, I got to write a book. I got to establish a journal. So I created a thing called Ujima, the Journal of Collective Work and Responsibility that I used to publish. And then the notion of creating an academic program. And that is at Indiana University, the PhD program. In my book, I'm looking at these two festival traditions that happen and once again, we're trying to get it as steady. Two festival traditions that occur, one in Havana, Cuba, the other one in New Orleans, Louisiana. One is in a place called Congo Square, if you've ever been to New Orleans, where they stage for the floats for Mardi Gras. It's in Congo Square. Every Sunday, the Africans would be free, and they would get to go there and kind of celebrate, hang out, do everything. And then in Cuba, every January 15th, it's called El Dia de Reyes, the Day of the Kings, where they said a black cloud would descend over the city, and the quote was, and the Africans would celebrate and the people would celebrate in African revelries or something like that. I took those two sentences, one about what happened in Congo Square and this other thing, and I said, I think there's more going on than that. I think there's more going on, that these people aren't just partying, they live in these oppressive kind of things. And so I basically make this argument that they're actually reacting to 3 or 4 major assaults: an assault on space, an assault on the social image of blackness, an assault on the black family, an assault on the notion of community and the ability for people to create a pan-African kind of unified community. And so when we were talking the other day and somebody asked me the questions about minstrelsy and everything else, because I tell you, one of my chapters is about the image of the degradation of the image of blackness and Africans, and where I go all the way through to show you everything from how this fake science is being created at the time to try to say that blacks are not humans, trying to say that their skulls are the skulls of chimpanzees and stuff like that, trying to, all this crazy stuff because they're trying to get science to say that, maybe we should end slavery for moral reasons, but no, we can't, because black people can't be let out with other folk. They can't be out there. And then when you see even the posters of the minstrelsy stuff, they're all mimicking the fake science stuff. Big protruding lips, jaw lines coming out here, all the rest of this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's also, remember I told you the assault on the black family? That's why when I told you, there's plantations I found where there's 846 men and 12 women. 1,064 men and 14 women. They're never going to have families and have positive birth rates or anything like that. And that's the case in Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, all these places, these crazy numbers. So I decided that was what I wanted to do with my career, do that thing. So that's the African diaspora approach. Most universities today either do African American but it seems passe a little bit now. It's like that's all you're going to do is start at 16, 19. But African diaspora has become the kind of major one, especially because we're interdisciplinary. We validate, like in my book, I use the inscriptions on drums, carvings, little dolls that the people create, and understand what they meant in Africa and why just bringing them to this place is a political act now. Because like a drum, if you have a drum and it's just a drum, no problem. But if they outlaw the drum and then you bring a drum, it's a political act. You know what I mean? And in many cases, there was all these different things going on. How do you, if there's assault on family, but you still push up the image of family, parade in the streets as men and women to bring forth an image of family, you know what I mean? Create, like I say, deities that you create that talk about family, because you still say family's important. Forget if they tell you that you can marry or not, if they got 1,000 dudes on this plantation, only 12 women. You believe that family's important, or you believe that your image should not be denigrated, that kind of stuff. Let me see what you got. Let's keep going in. So those are the three kind of approaches. I gave you guys a bunch of literature. The books that I mentioned, almost every one of them is also on the list that I already gave you guys, that we already have on the list there. I think every one of them should be. But that's what I'm talking about being prepared. All right? What people do is they take, and it's no diss to anybody here, but many times they're like, we got this initiative for ethnic studies. Let's find somebody of color and just put them there. And I think that's terrible because I'm not prepared, trained, you know what I mean? And then you put me up there set up to fail almost. But if you really do the work and train the teachers and give them people always bring me in and they want, Daniel, but they don't want, I want to talk about teaching, about the subject. You know what I mean? Like, let's get to this, what's a new paradigm that we could use or a rubric or something? Do you know the information? If you don't do your multiplication tables, how are you going to start doing long division? You know what I'm saying? But nobody cares about the school system. They just be like, okay, you can do it. Don't even ask you a question. Have you ever taken any of these classes? How many of you guys in ethnic studies, did they really look at your transcript and ask you, have you taken these classes? Are they really giving you the type of education that you need to be comfortable in the classroom when somebody asks you something like that? I'm so on it because I think ethnic studies is a great thing that we're doing, but we got to do it with the same fidelity we do mathematics and other things. And we can't just be afraid because there's a new political climate. It's a law in the state of California. And there's nothing wrong with teaching about Native people, about teaching about Asian people, about people of Latinos, and about black people. You know what I'm saying? But we need to get the same amount of training to do that. So once again, you can be the best person in the class. You know? But all the stuff I want to have you guys, you're like, I'm in this state, they never, nothing. And this is just the basic level stuff, you guys. I'm not just throwing some stuff out, I'm just trying to whiz your mind. The foundational pieces of it. So what your districts need to bring me in to teach history, you know what I mean, to the teachers, not talk about some other crap. They still need to get their subject matter together so they can move forward on this stuff. You know? So anyway, any other question? Other question?
Sharp, brother.
All right. So yeah. We got it. Yeah, here we go.
I have a quick